There is a pond on the edge of my town behind a large willow. I've never seen it being used. I've never seen a duck swimming in it, or even leaves or other sea creatures, let alone people taking a bath, or just dipping their feet in it. Every time I passed by the pond, it was like walking past a ghost town. It was eerie to see how deserted it was, how the water surface remained still and smooth as glass, even during windy weather conditions. But despite the strange power emanating from it, I couldn't help but admire its purity and beauty. When I stopped in front of the pond with my bike for the first time, my gaze was captivated. I stared at the oval outline, the reflection of the surface, the plants growing on the bank, and the dusk that shone colorfully on the horizon, and rounded off the beauty of the pond. I'm sure I sound crazy for wasting so much time and emotion describing a pond. Even my parents thought I was crazy when I raved about it one night at the dinner table. But it's important that I tell you about it, considering what happened 3 weeks ago. I was on my way to school when I saw an ambulance drive past me. It was heading straight for the edge of town and turned into the grassy area where the willow was. I didn't think anything of it at first and went to school as normal. In the afternoon, during the last lesson, we were all surprised when our school principal made an announcement and said that we should watch out on the way home or have our parents pick us up. That was all that was said. On the way out, I heard students everywhere throwing around theories and rumors. I often heard missing student, disappeared, and murdered, but there were also really nonsensical things, so I didn't pay any attention to them at first. My father came and picked me up just to be sure. I was surprised because he was still supposed to be at work and would only pick me up in the worst case scenario. However, I dismissed it as a good gesture from a parent and didn't think much of it. I was a little worried about my girlfriend, Rachel, though, because she would probably expect me to take her home. But my father insisted that I get into the car. Without arguing, I did as I was told. When I brought up the subject of the principal's announcement at the dinner table that evening, everyone suddenly became quiet. My parents looked at each other worriedly. I sat up curiously and asked, "Do you know more about it? Does it have something to do with the ambulance this morning?" My mother sipped her tea and said, "It turns out that student from your school went missing this morning. It is believed that he was kidnapped because his bag was found, but I don't think that's enough evidence." I swallowed hard and finally asked where the bag was found. My mother replied that it happened on the outskirts of the town next to the big willow. I would like to justify myself and make it clear that I was 16 years old at the time and still in the phase where I would try anything. If someone had bet me that I could ride a skateboard across a dilapidated bridge, I probably would have done it. My thirst for adventure was too great for that. When I finally found out that someone had disappeared at the pond, I knew I had to go to the scene myself. Luckily, there was no school the next day, so I rode my bike to the outskirts of town. I had told my parents I would stop by Rachel's house and check on them. They were still fresh out of bed, so they probably weren't too concerned about it. But I also felt bad that I hadn't gone to visit Rachel, so I decided to go to her house straight after my explorations. When I arrived at the pond, I saw that the crime scene had been removed. There was no bag, and the whole area around the willow was as green and unused as ever. I saw no change at the pond either. It couldn't be possible that the missing student was in the water, otherwise he would have been found immediately. I dared to step onto the bank and take a closer look. The water was clearer than the sky could ever be and offered a clear view of what was happening in the ground. Here and there roots were sticking out, and you could see loose rocks that had probably been thrown in. Otherwise, the entire ground was just sand like in a desert, wavy, hilly and smooth, almost untouched. The view of the pond was simply majestic. I had the urge to reach in and see if the water would feel as great on my skin, but I was stopped by a loud scream in the background. I pulled my hand away and turned around. A person emerged from behind the willow. She was about my age, well dressed, and her brown hair looked like she had been combing it 100 times nonstop. "Rachel," she came straight up to me and raised her finger like a strict teacher. "Where have you been yesterday? A classmate went missing, and I had to walk home alone. Is that how you treat your girlfriend?" Rachel has always been very hot-tempered and could be quite bossy, but at that moment I was overcome with shame. I really should have gone to see her the day before and walked her home. I really didn't know what I was thinking. I apologized to Rachel and was about to embrace her, but she pushed me away. "You can make it up to me by taking me home now, but first, you stop at the mall and get me something." I nodded vigorously and promised to make it up to her. I hated acting like that, but Rachel just had this power that made you feel bad for yourself. My mother had brought it up to me once, but I didn't want to listen to her because I had just gotten together with Rachel and I was head over heels in love with her. "What are you even doing here?" Rachel asked. I had completely forgotten why I was here at that moment, but I didn't want to tell her about the connection I possibly found between the pond and the missing student because she would think I was crazy, so I just told her that I was here to feed the ducks. Rachel laughed. "There aren't even ducks here. This pond has been just a decoration for ages, so the lawn doesn't look so deserted. But it's so beautiful. You have to look at it and see how clear it is," I said, a little too excited for my liking. Rachel eyed me confusedly, too. Without raising her eyebrows any further, I instead took her hand and led her to the shore. I asked her to take a look, which she did. "Don't you see how clear the water is? As if you're looking into a portal where a beautiful desert landscape is visible, right?" I thought Rachel would at least understand what I was trying to say, or just shrug her shoulders and leave, but her reaction was more than surprising. She frowned and recoiled slightly, as if she had seen something strange. "What's that?" she said, stammering. Then she looked at me. "Is this some kind of joke?" I stood there rooted to the spot, feeling guilty for some reason. I knew it was just Rachel's persuasive ability to make me feel bad, but I was genuinely curious as to what she was getting at. "Can't you see that?" she asked, louder this time. I did as she told me and looked into the water, too, albeit a little hesitantly, eager to see what had frightened her so much. But I saw nothing, just the clear water with the sandy bottom. I told Rachel I didn't see anything, and she hit me on the head. "Don't act like that, of course you can see it." She turned back to the surface and screamed at her own reflection. "No, stop that. I've said you must stop." Now, I felt a mixture of confusion and panic. I really didn't know what Rachel was doing, but at that moment all I cared about was her well-being. Her behavior came out of nowhere and was so strange that I really wondered if she was still the Rachel I had come to know and love. Just as I was about to grab her and pull her away from the edge, something happened that would haunt me for the rest of my life like a recurring nightmare. Rachel reached for the water as if she wanted to attack it and sank into the pond. Even though the area near the bank was less than 3 feet deep, I couldn't see her when she hit the surface. The water was crystal clear. Panicking, I dug my hands into the water and searched for my girlfriend. I couldn't feel any hands, feet, or even a strand of her hair. She didn't make a sound, aside from my hands splashing in the water and my desperate screams. The pond was dead silent. I jumped inside, stopped thinking about the mysterious strength of the pond, and dug my hands and feet deep into the sand, searching in vain for Rachel. The sand felt incredibly on my skin. After 20 minutes I had waded through the entire pond and had no luck. Rachel was gone. I got out of the pond and sobbed. I didn't know what to do. My only thought was how Rachel's parents would take the news that their daughter had disappeared without a trace. I still hoped that she would mysteriously turn up somewhere. I didn't care how unlikely it seemed. I wanted to hold on to that tiny spark of hope. I got on my bike and hurried away from the pond, away from the willow. My mind, however, worked on its own and made my head turn back once more. Despite the great distance I had covered, the pond was still clearly in my field of vision, piercing my heart with its heavenly appearance. After the incident with Rachel at the pond, everything that came afterwards happened so quickly. I told Rachel's parents about her disappearance, trying to explain everything as plausibly as possible without mentioning that the pond had literally swallowed her. I also left myself out of the picture and limited my part to a random witness so that the investigation would not target me. It hurt my heart, but it was for the best. All of this happened 3 weeks ago, and Rachel is still missing. She has never been seen since the incident at the pond. Going to school became a nightmare. All I heard was Rachel's name. There were many expressions of condolence. Many of her friends came to me, hugged me, and assured me that would return safely, which I strongly doubted. But I also heard very negative voices about Rachel's absence, that she deserved it, that the world would be better off without her, etc. I had seen this coming, because Rachel didn't exactly have a good reputation among us students. I ignored the people as best I could, and with each passing day the excitement died down a little. The school dedicated a day to commemorate the events. This has never happened before, but it was a very special case, as 2 students had disappeared at the same time. I also finally found out who the first missing student was, and I was actually a little relieved when I heard his name. His name is Riley, and he is one of those students who thinks it's cool to bully others. He has often caused younger students to see the nurse and has never been seriously punished for it. I would have at least been somewhat understanding of his behavior if he had had a difficult home life, but I've heard from a friend that he grew up in wealthy circles, and his parents are the kind of people who defend their child at all costs, so it was no surprise when they recently planned to sue our school for poor protection measures. The lawsuit is still ongoing, but I don't see much hope for Riley's parents. Now Rachel and Riley were gone. Both were victims of an extraordinary perpetrator, and now I have only one question. What did they see in the pond that sealed their fate, and why couldn't I see it? Today I rode my bike up to the willow again, simply because my instinct told me to, but I didn't get very far, because the pond was fenced off with barrier tape. At least it wouldn't claim any more victims. In the future, I've always been a rather rational person, and never believed in things like karma, but lately I've been hearing this word from a lot of people, even from my mother. I try to ignore it as much as I can, but there's a part of my mind that just wouldn't stop telling me that Rachel has always been a bad person and a horrible girlfriend.